travel to every country in the world. She's completed the Traveler Century Club list multiple times. Welcome, Audrey Walsworth.
Well, it's fine. It's nice to be here with you all.
Now, I think some of the travelers are very, very young. They've heard your Counting Countries interview that our group member Rick Gazarian did a few years ago.
Uh-huh.
And,
Uh-huh.
and they're all inspired by your traveling so early, in many cases before they were born. So talk about what launched you onto this travel.
Well, it started with um, I'm I'm probably one of the few people that is 100% anything. I'm 100% Lithuanian. All four of my grandparents came from Lithuania in the early 1900s. So when one during the Cold War in 1969, there was a surprise trip that was organized in Chicago to go to Lithuania, which was at that time part of the Soviet Union. So my mother was telling me about it, and I casually mentioned to my husband, if I ever thought I wanted to go to Lithuania, this would be the time because I'd be going with two people that were my mother and my aunt who are fluent in Lithuanian. So this would be a good time to go. So he said, well, why don't you call and see how much it is? So I called my mother and she said, well, it was $999 and it included everything: airfare over there, hotel, everything we did, all the food, everything. So he said, sign up. So, and they were leaving in like 10 days. So I scurried around, I got everything done. And of course, I thought I couldn't, at first I thought I couldn't go because I was indispensable. I had three children at home, although two of them were in high school. So, they could basically take care of themselves. So that started it. And I loved everything about it. It was a very, very difficult trip because of the antagonism and the how hard they made everything. There wasn't anything easy about it, but it really whet my appetite. So then um, after that, when the China trip came up, actually 11 years later in 1980, um, that of course started it. I thought, I this is someplace not very many people have been. It will be like it's always been, and that's what started it. So then the next one was Tibet, because for the same reasons, Antarctica for the same reasons,
Mm.
and so that's what I did.
Talk about it, Tibet. So this is early 1980s, going to Tibet.
Yes, and the one thing about, well, there were a lot of things about Tibet. I loved it, loved it. The people were very, very nice, but that was so early in travel to Tibet that the Tibetans were still greeting us in the traditional way. The traditional way for greeting in Tibet in those days was to rub the top of your head and stick out your tongue. So, so it was the first time somebody did that. We Some of the group was really shocked because they had no idea. But I had read ahead of time that that was a traditional old time greeting, and
Mm.
so many places that we went, we were greeted with people rubbing their head and sticking their tongues out. So, so that's I think what started my um, feeling that I wanted to go places that were not spoiled, that didn't have so many tourists, that they were jaded, that they adopted things that really didn't fit in with their culture. So then that's what I did. I went places where I knew things. I knew when there would be a lot of tourists coming that would change. So I regret that travelers now will not be able to see some of these places as they originally were. But still go travel. I mean, there are still lots of cultures out there that have much to teach us. So
Fantastic. And speaking of the head rub and that, the camera's moved a little bit, so we're only seeing part of you. at the moment.
How's that?
A little better. Let's see. We're just seeing the left half of your face, so we'll just move it back a little and almost back. Audrey's been a wonderful sport with all this technology to get the live stream into Facebook. It is complicated and
Oh,
been great. So we're still, if you can still, we're still only seeing the left half. So if you can back up a little or a
is
little
that too?
more, more. You're a
Is
little
that all
close.
right?
Mhm.
What?
You can be a little farther back, and then it would be perfect.
Okay.
Want everybody to see your smile, and uh,
Okay.
and just yeah, are you able to get a little farther back from the camera? Yep.
Better?
Okay. Yep, we're getting right there. Okay, perfect. So we've got a question here for your 193 UN countries. Ryan is asking about the final one of the 193. Specifically, did you save one to treat as the final one or celebrate?
No, no. I have to say that I did not. I didn't start out by doing the UN ones. I started out by, for the first 15 or 20 trips, just
Mhm,
places I wanted to go. I didn't, and at that time I didn't realize there was any kind of a list at all. I didn't
mhm,
pay any attention to it. So I, then when I found out I had been to 90 some countries, and someone said to me, well, do you belong to the Traveler Century Club? You have to have gone to 100. And I didn't even know about the club. So once I joined the Traveler Century Club, then I was working on going to those places. So the 193 United Nations ones just fell in with the rest of the trips. I
mhm,
didn't set out with that as a purpose. But now, if I had known that then, that's probably what I would have done first. But I just stumbled across all of this. I mean, I did this and I did that, and whatever struck me, in other words, I didn't have a plan.
mhm.
Uh, so, um, but those of you that have a plan, I think starting with the United Nations country is a wonderful place to start.
And just start. So that's part of the spirit we love about you. We've got another question from Brent. So, what countries do you have the best memory of on each continent? So you get to pick one. Maybe
On
it's not
each,
even your favorite, but best memory is the phrase he said.
oh my gosh, that's quite a question. Um, well, let's see. I'm going to have to think about that. I would say that
How about
um,
North America? That's a limited choice.
North America. Well, I think North America would be all the my experience, my college experience, because I grew up in Chicago and came had an experience my first year in college. I didn't enjoy it, and so I stumbled onto the University of Missouri. Believe me, just stumbled into it, and
Mhm.
was in a journalism school and loved everything about it. So I would say that that was one of my best experiences, along with others. Um, Gosh, I don't know. With as many places as I've been, I've had wonderful experiences, lots of places. So it's hard for me to pinpoint one to each continent. I would say that going to Antarctica when I went the first time and flew over on a Chilean Air Force plane and stayed at the base there, that
Mhm.
was probably um, one of my choice experiences. I loved that. And I don't know, too many experiences probably to talk about. Wish I could
Okay.
pinpoint them, but I'd have to think long and hard about that.
Ezra is asking, which country did you find to have the friendliest people?
The friendliest people. Um, I think I I think the friendliest, the surprise that I thought Vietnam gave me a great surprise because of how friendly they were, because I was there right after the war. And I thought there'd be a lot of antagonism and bitterness, but there wasn't. The people were lovely. So I would say probably that. If I'd think deep and hard about it, I'd probably think of another, but I'd say offhand that's it.
All right, and we've got so many questions. So Debjit is asking, he's saying he hopes this is not an insensitive question. Any reactions to the millennial traveler who claims to be the first woman to visit every country, the first documented woman?
Well, there's no, it's not an insensitive question, and that's come up several times, and she is even, well, there's a writer that writes for Forbes and some travel magazines that has written several articles about her challenging that. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, they've contacted me. And all I can say is that if she did that, I'm not saying for sure she didn't, but I find it hard to believe that she did that in that length of time, just because of the fact that now she may have two passports. And through my travels, I've had two passports, and I'm sure some of you may have too. But she would have, I just find it would be very, very difficult. She'd have to be super organized. I mean, organized to the point where she herself was running from one visa, in Washington, running from one embassy to another to get the visas. I just think it would be very difficult to do that.
Yeah, and
And
things have
she's
certainly
gotten,
changed.
well, pardon?
As the things have changed in some of the logistics, certainly, so some things are easier speed wise. I
That's
think
right,
also the
because
question.
now you've got e-visas.
Yeah.
Well, see, she was still working on that when there weren't quite as many of those e-visas. But there have been several people that have challenged her, and I've gotten some people that I've traveled with that have said, well, maybe she did, maybe she didn't. So anyway, it's not a
Yeah.
sensitive question because I don't care. I know what I did. She knows what she did.
Yeah, and I think that's where I think a lot of the travelers, and I wrote a piece too that I shared with you some time back of trying to document women such as yourself that maybe haven't had a PR firm or publicity involved
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm.
not so much the speed, but the idea that claiming to be the first by creating your own definition of first that got.
That's right. That's right. That's exactly right.
So talk about what it felt like when you said it, a lot of this structure or planning was not something you were thinking about. The systematic travel came later. What did it feel like to have reached every country in the world, regardless of being a man or a woman? It's a rare achievement.
Well, it was almost I was working towards it. Then when I did it, when it happened on Wake Island, which at that time, and I think it's still pretty hard to get to, um,
Mm-hmm.
it was like, you know what? Did I really do that? And even today, it's funny, but I wrote everything down in my journals, and I'm lucky because my husband is a printer and publisher, so he printed my journals, all 6 volumes of them, and sometimes I look at those books and I look at the pictures because I took a lot of pictures and put a lot of pictures in the books, and I thought, did I really do that? Was that just a dream that I dreamt that? And it just I have to say that I'm close to not traveling anymore because I'll be 86 next month, and I just I feel like I can live it all over again just by looking
Mm-hmm.
through my journals and looking at the pictures, and I'm really grateful that I took the time to do that, to write everything down.
And I don't want to disrupt the flow. The camera slid a little bit, so we're only seeing part of you. I know
Is that
we've been
better?
we're only seeing the top of your head. So it just if you can
Better?
low, still lower, still lower. We're getting your glasses. We're making progress.
Better?
Yeah, bit. We've got one eye. Audrey's been such a great sport with all the
Better?
technology I've put her into. We're getting closer. Yep. If you can be a little farther away or perfect. Oh, there we're back. We're back. Perfect.
Okay.
Exactly that.
Okay.
Okay. Wonderful. All right. So Ryan is asking about young travelers. Someone just turned 18 first passport wants to go somewhere uncommon, what's the first place that jumps to mind for you?
I would say Papua New Guinea.
Wow. Why? That's the follow-up. Talk about it.
Well, because I think now it's been years since I've been there, but I have no reason to think that it's changed as much as, say, China changed. Uh, because by nature of the fact that it's not easy to get to, it's far away, it's challenging in that you still have mostly a native population. But those are all the reasons why it would be a spectacular first trip. Now, it's not, it wouldn't be everybody's bag, but that's what I would say. Of course, you could do something that would be wonderful, that would be not quite as drastic as that. Like you could go to Greenland. Greenland
Mm,
is
wow.
would be a thought. What do you think about that, Stefan? Greenland?
When you mentioned I mean, Papua New Guinea is an incredible destination. Greenland, it's one of those that I only booked a few days and got there and immediately felt I should have booked a much longer trip.
Yeah.
Uh,
So, but
it
see,
is costly. I mean, there are, I think, for both of those destinations, there's costs involved that might be
mm-hmm.
more than some 18-year-olds. How about something that you think would work really well for a budget traveler? So let's say
uh,
someplace underrated in Europe that jumps to mind.
well, of course, Croatia is very hot. I love Croatia.
Mhm.
Um, it's a hot destination all of a sudden. Um, let's see. I'm going to have to stop and think about this. Uh, gosh, I don't. I can't.
Well,
I wish.
you told me you didn't visit Paris until quite some years into your travels. Where should Paris be in the order of travel? How many years was it you were traveling until
Well,
you visited Paris?
I've been traveling about 20 years before I got to Paris. so uh, maybe of course, see, the thing about it is if you pick too exotic a place, it'll be a little bit harder to get to and a little bit more expensive. I thought Armenia was wonderful.
Hmm.
um, but
Yeah, and you said the word uncommon, and I mean you've had a life in business, doing things beyond travel, studied journalism. So uncommon might not necessarily be exotic, but I think you've talked about visiting places where it's a very different life experience than yours
uh-huh.
to learn
Well, I'd say Armenia would fall under that.
from.
um, uh, well, you could go to Greece and go up to Delphi and places like that rather than do
Mm,
the Greek islands, and you'd get a
mhm,
different experience. And it wouldn't be you'd be going to Europe, but you'd be still visiting some place that everybody doesn't go to. Um,
mhm,
but offhand, I can't. I'd have to really
mhm.
sit down and think
Those are
about that.
those are some great suggestions, and Mohammed is asking about the revisit. So some countries I think China you've visited 5 times. What's the one right now that you would like to see again, first on your list?
Oh, well, I think I'd like to go back to Papua New Guinea because it's
Mm,
been 20 years since I've been there, but I
mm,
went twice. Um, I would like to go back there to see how much it's changed. Hopefully, not much. Uh, let's see, I would, uh, so many of these places, because I wasn't organized and I was just jumping around, there were
mhm.
a lot of places that I had to go back to just because I had to go there to get someplace else. You know what I'm talking
Okay.
about?
Yeah, yeah.
So there are lots of places I've been 2 and 3 times, and so I don't have any special place except I would like to go back to Papua New Guinea a lot. I would really like to go back there. So
Fantastic. And Brent is asking some of the most beautiful views you've seen.
oh my gosh, oh my gosh. When I was doing my journals, I would I can remember thinking, oh my goodness, this is another wonderful place. This is, I would say, how beautiful. There are so many beautiful places in the world that it's just like the trip to Socotra. You know, really, Stefan, it's so rocky that you would think
Mhm.
it's not beautiful, but it was
Mm.
really beautiful. Those cliffs, when you're on the water, the cliffs look like they were almost rainbows. There were so many different colors in the granite and the stone and things, so that there are just many beautiful places. The only thing that ruins the beautiful places are the people that ruin it. You know,
Mm.
the trash and the no respect for where they are and that sort of thing. But there are lots of beautiful places in the world.
Yeah, and you mentioned Socotra. The audience may not know we were scheduled to travel together there last year, and you had about a 10-hour mechanical delay in Atlanta, despite all the efforts to reroute through Europe, through Athens. We held the plane, Yemenia plane, as long as they would do it, but you ended up just missing by about a half hour,
Yeah,
and yet
that's
a few
about
weeks
it.
later you were back in Socotra. So talk about your resilience and persistence.
Well, I fell apart. It was such a stressful trip. It was late leaving Atlanta, and I was supposed, and then it was late leaving Athens. They rerouted me to Athens. It was late leaving Athens. I got to Cairo, which was the place where we were supposed to catch the plane to go to Socotra. And my bags didn't come. So I had to wait and see whether, I was waiting for my bag because I couldn't go to Socotra without my bag.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. So I saw a hotel, I saw the lights from the airport, got over there, laid down on the bed and just fell apart, cried and cried and cried and cried, trying to figure out what I was going to do. Got up in the next day and said, well, think I better go home and regroup where I can, settle myself down. And that's what I did. And then 2 weeks, not that week, but the next week, I was back in Cairo on my way to Socotra. So
And
if you want to
it's a
go have
weekly
a,
flight, so it wasn't something about waiting for the next day. I remember
yeah,
you said you called Delta, made them refund your miles and fly you back
yeah,
and
they
start
did.
over.
They, well, they had to. They screwed me up twice.
Yeah.
So no, they did. And the gal that organized the trip, she gave me a special price. Um, she gave me some credit for the trip that I missed because I missed that trip. But I still had to pay for it. And
Hmm.
so anyway, incidentally, I made a claim to the insurance company for a delay
Hmm.
of trip, lost
Hmm.
baggage. It was a week before I got my bag. A week.
No, wow. Yeah.
Yeah,
Huh.
and they said it was not a very verifiable problem. So
Oh, geez.
anyway, so much for travel insurance.
But you did make it to Socotra, a wonderful destination. Tim Skeet is asking about your journal. You mentioned journaling. So he says, journals are personal. Would you ever consider publishing a compilation? I think
Well,
he said your title maybe should be what you just said. Did I really do that?
well, what I picked for the title of the journals was "My Life in the Rest of the World."
Ah,
So,
will you
uh,
share those publicly at some point?
well, I and people that have wanted them, some friends and relatives and things, I've given them to. But you have to realize that all those trips, several hundred trips, the journals they're the size of a yearbook. So everybody
Hmm.
knows what a yearbook size is.
Hmm.
There are six of them, and they average 300 pages a book. So it's a lot of writing, a lot of book, and a lot of pictures. So so anyway, if somebody wants them badly enough, I'll send them a set, but they have to be prepared because it's a little intimidating.
Okay, we've lost the video. We can still hear you, so we can either continue audio, or Audrey, you would have to exit and restart it. What are you comfortable doing?
Well, let's just do the audio, okay? If that's all right with you. They've seen what I look like.
Uh,
Okay.
That's no problem. We've got good audio, so we'll continue that way. And um, she's been gamely positioning her iPad and holding it in her arms this time. So we've tremendous tremendous patience with me to get the live stream technology working. So we'll continue this way. Thank you all watching for your understanding in that respect. We've got a bunch more questions. So Debjit is asking some of your favorite cuisines or dishes on your travels.
Well, I can't remember which trip it was, but I had nasi goreng for the first place. So now anytime I'm any place where they have nasi goreng, I always order it. And
Mhm.
I've taught my grandchildren to also love nasi goreng. Incidentally, I've taken my grandchildren 11 summers. I've taken them on trips. So they've the oldest one has averaged 11, well, no, the youngest one has averaged about 10 trips, and the oldest ones have averaged about that many. So I have 7 grandchildren, and I've taken them, of course, they didn't realize it at the time, but I've taken them places that were on the list, like Angel Falls. Now, how many people take young kids to Angel Falls? Um, I took them to the Sandblast Islands when it was on the list. I've
Mhm.
taken them to, they've been to Vietnam, they've been to Cambodia, they've been to Burma, they've been, uh, and consequently now they've all got the fever. So your group has a fever, and my grandkids have the fever. So I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing.
Oh yeah, I mean they're like, oh, I'm sure they're like, oh, my grandma's so cool. Sandblast Islands. I mean, I know little about it. Talk about the Sandblast Island.
Yeah. Well, and they just and we really stayed in a primitive little place on this. They had to sleep in hammocks, and there was no air conditioning, and there was no light at night. So they had to they had to hope that the moon was bright so they could read. And anyway, but it taught them that, as I said before, that everybody does the same thing. They just do it differently.
All
So
right. And
around the world.
speaking of the TCC list, and the Sandblasts, I believe, are a retired
Uh-huh.
destination from the list. Ryan is asking, so you've completed the list 5 times, I believe?
Well, yeah, because see, every time they added one, I did it when it was 319, and that was Wake Island, the last one. And then I've been to Margarita Island. I've been to Sinai. I can't remember what else they had asked, but I've completed it 5 different times.
And
So
so now the two that were added this past December, South Ossetia and Austral Islands, are the only that you're missing.
yeah,
And
they are.
that will
And
be
I have no plans for those. I just I think I'm through chasing countries. If I go someplace now, it's going to be someplace I really want to go, not because it's on the list.
except Ryan is saying you are adorable and he wants to go on a trip with you. So it may need to be the Australs or oh wait, then Pete says no. He's first in line to travel with you. So now
Okay.
everybody sees how disappointed I was. I was standing in Cairo Airport. That's the old Terminal One. At they have multiple layers of security, but I was checked in, and they were going to close customs. I was still waiting. So then I go through customs, and I'm waiting at the edge of the customs. I'm saying, she's coming, she's coming. And even on the plane, there was, we had all boarded and we weren't moving. And then like 10 minutes later, a van came. We said, oh, she's got to be in the van. And it was a family that had been delayed. So we had great
Oh,
disappointment that we couldn't travel with you to um, um,
this
uh,
Dakota.
that we couldn't travel to Socotra
Well,
together.
it
It was just
just it was just not meant to be, I guess.
yeah, but it was meant to be in those 2 weeks. So yeah, the flood of questions and firsts and comments, I'm catching up. Yeah, you are the grandma that we all dream of having. Linda says no cure for the fever. So yeah, you've got a lot of new fans and fans that you've known for a long time. We've got What was your best experience in India? Brent is asking. And how many times have you been to India?
Let's see. I would say I've been to India probably 3 or 4 times, and I love India. It took me a while to go, just because I was afraid that the um, the the poverty would be something that would be hard for me to handle. But I had a friend tell me, give me some good advice. Can you hear me?
Oh, I can. Yes.
Okay. Um,
Hmm.
he said he was a world traveler, and he said, Audrey, when you go someplace, you always have to remember two things. When you're a visitor, you didn't cause it, whatever it is that you're looking at that you don't like. You didn't cause it, and there's really nothing you can do about it. And when you realize those two things, then you can go and appreciate a place just for what it has to offer you. So the next trip I went to India, and I was so glad I did because the country is beautiful, the people are lovely, food is good. Um, it's just an experience. It in my mind, it's an experience of colors and sensations. Um, they're beautiful colors every place. You see women in cerise and purple and shocking pink and lime green, and oh, just beautiful colors. And tastes. Their food is, you have all different kinds of tastes than what we have here. So it's a lovely country. They're beautiful, beautiful temples and beautiful hotels. It's and besides that, it's a very interesting place. The Hindu temples are fascinating. The amount of gods they have, and um, their their form of worship is so different from what we know that it's a lovely it's a good trip. It's a good place to go. Good country to visit.
Fantastic. And I was thinking, just when you were talking about that, uh, who do you socialize with at home? Do you only talk to travelers, or I'm wondering,
No,
when you get.
what's funny is when I started traveling, when the kids were still in high school, I would go on a trip, and people in town would say, okay, well, where have you been? Where have you been? So I'd tell them. Well, after I'd been traveling for about 15 years and I'd been a lot of different places, they got so they didn't even ask me. It's funny. They just stopped asking me. But I had a friend in Colombia who was a big traveler, and she would call me every once in a while, and she'd say, she had the same problem. She would call me and she would say, Audrey, come down and have lunch. I just came back from a fantastic trip, and nobody cares about hearing about it but you. So I'd go down and tell her about my trips, and she'd tell me about her trips. But people um, they reach a point where they don't know what to ask about. They don't know what to say. So
Mhm.
after so many places, they just stop. Did you experience that too,
Yeah,
Stefan?
one of the best advice I ever got related to travel was I studied Mandarin Chinese in high school, and my sophomore year, I wasn't enjoying my school in Philadelphia, wanted to study abroad, and they said, "Oh, China is a bit too tough for a sophomore. We only let juniors, or maybe you can go to Paris." And I said, "Look, I know what I'm doing. Shanghai is better for me
Mm-hmm.
than Philadelphia. I'm going." And so they got all this people to sign paperwork so that I could go as an irresponsible sophomore. In hindsight, it's ridiculous, but they had an orientation session, and a young woman working in the office said, the one thing to keep in mind is that when you get back to school the next semester, no one will care. She
That's
said
right.
they'll ask you how was it, and you'll say it was great, and then they'll go back to talking about the football game or whatever else is
Mm-hmm.
local to their current concerns. And it's just and she said you'll want to talk and talk and talk about it. Find other people who have had the similar experience, because they're the only ones who will be really interested. And so, yeah, when I came back the next semester, my roommates, they had, I think, gotten an Xbox and were playing new video games, and they said, "How was it?" And I said it was great. And that's the last they mentioned it.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's what I experienced too. The first couple of trips, they asked all kinds of questions, and I had people ask me, clubs in town ask me to give programs, which I did, and but then all of a sudden it started trickling away. It's just that they're interested, but it's something that that they can't latch their minds around. Don't you think?
Yeah, and it's not that they don't want to. It's just
Hello.
yeah, it's something that even later in my working career, working in international department, people they're going home in the suburbs in the U.S. and they're sealing their deck on the weekend, and so they would joke like, "Oh, did you like the weekend Osama bin Laden was killed?" And I came back typically unshaven from somewhere, and they said, "Oh, now we really know you work for the CIA," because that was the only thing they could think of. you know,
You know,
do we still have?
Stefan, you're breaking up.
Okay, it looks like the connection's a little weak on the phone. Are you still able to hear me? It looks like
Stefan,
your connection improved. Are you able to hear me now?
Stefan,
I
you're breaking up.
Yeah, I think we might have. I wonder if your battery is low.
Well, my battery was full, but see, it's
Okay,
probably, it's using it up pretty
okay.
fast, I guess.
Are you hearing me better now? It looks like your connection improved.
Okay.
Uh, we can, if we'll try for a moment. If or just let me know if you're able to hear me clearly now.
No, it's still breaking up.
I see. Let me try what I can do. We can hear you very well. Um, I will call you on the phone and we'll just test if that works for the last few questions.
Okay, you'll call me on the phone?
Yep, so just keep this, don't touch this. I will call you and we will try to take the last few questions. And if not, we will get you another time. So I will try to get this to work.
Hello? Okay.
All right, I'm unmuting. I think we're good.
Okay, it
So
sounds,
we'll take a couple more questions. All right. So let's see. Uh, Ben Sam said you should be hired by the Indian Tourism Board. And we've got a question about traveling with a husband who may not like to travel as much as you do.
well, I didn't do much of that. We really didn't. When we were younger, we went to the islands, went to Hawaii, went to Bermuda, all those all those places, and we did go to England and Scotland and Wales, but other than that, he wasn't even slightly interested. So we quit that.
And I think the wisdom is he doesn't ask about the cost of the trip and you just go.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, and let's see. I think we are caught up. People are in awe. They all want to travel with you. They all.
Well, that's
And oh yes, I forgot to ask. You mentioned India, but we didn't talk about Andaman Islands.
oh well. I went to the Andaman Islands, and uh, well, we got that horrible echo.
You can put the
Um,
phone down when you're answering. Just put the phone down.
okay, can you hear me?
Mhm. Yep.
Okay. Well, the Andaman Islands, India is protecting the Andaman Islands because there are tribes that live there that are still as they've always been. They're very primitive. And so you're supposed, when you land at Port Blair, they make you sign a thing that you won't go to these particular islands. And of course, that's where I was supposed to be going. So I thought, well, if this guy that's taking me says it's all right, I'm going. So I went, and we were pulling. They made you stop at each island, and they would have a policeman at each place, and then you'd have to show them your papers, and then they'd let you move on. So finally, when we got to the last one, which was the one that was really forbidden, um, we started across, and there was, before we got there was a big sign that said, do not roll down your windows. Don't stop. First of all, don't stop. Don't roll down your windows, and don't give them any food. So we hadn't gone very far at all, just a couple minutes into the island. And this woman, completely nude, naked as she could be, just a red string around her waist, runs screaming out of the bush, jumps on the hood of the car, and she's slamming her hands on the window. And so I said to the guide, what are we going to do? Because he stopped, which was another thing we weren't supposed to do. So he said, do you have any food? I said, well, I had this lunch that they gave me that I've only eaten. So I said, I've got an apple. So rolled down the window, gave her the apple, rolled down the window, but rolled up the window again. Then she ate some of the apple, and she's still pounding on the thing. So I gave her a half a sandwich, rolled down the window again, gave her a half a sandwich, and she sat there, ate some of the sandwich, and then crawled down and went back into the brush. But um, they the reason that they were protecting that was because these people had seen so few people. They weren't what you'd call civilized, or they weren't used to people. So, and it was a dangerous area because backpackers that had walked into that would disappear. They would be never seen again. So that's why it was so dangerous. And so I don't know why I persisted, but it was just because they told me I could go there, and I wanted to go there, so I did. Must have been foolish, but I've been lucky a lot of times, so I just forged ahead.
All right. And if are you able to hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay. Oh, good. So the connection's restored. So two more questions and then we'll finish. So,
Okay.
Audrey, have you had negative experiences in your travels? It sounds like you always look at the sunny side of things.
Well, um, well, I think when I've had a negative experience, it's been a personal experience. It's been, by that I mean, I can't think of uh, a place that I've been where I haven't been treated well. I have had times when I've been traveling with people that I don't particularly like, that were difficult to get along with. But as far as say, like, far as going to Greece and having a bad experience, or going to Papua New Guinea and having a bad experience, I can't think of one. All I can think of is just some personal experiences with people on trips that have been um, not very cordial, or um, I was on one trip with a woman who practically never spoke to me. If she spoke to
Really?
me, oh yeah, it was to make a snide remark. So
Oh,
I
wow.
always thought, someplace in at the very beginning, I must have done something. I must have said something that
Mm,
that did that, because I can remember when she left the trip, she wasn't on the whole trip. It was with a group. She wasn't on the whole trip. I can remember being very, very relieved, mostly
mm,
because I couldn't figure out what the problem was. But anyway, that's
mm.
been, as far as thinking real quick off the top of my head, that's the only bad experience I've had, would be with people that I've traveled with.
We'll close with, how did you introduce your grandkids to travel? Did you gradually slide them into amazing destinations, or throw into the deep end?
I threw them first into the Sandblast Islands in Panama, and then I took them to to the Greek islands. I took them to Rhodes and places like that. And then I took them to Belize. So those were great places because it was water and swimming and all that sort of thing. And then I took them to the Galapagos and they loved that. Then I took them to Paris and London and we took the Channel train and I took them to Alaska. Then I took them on a safari to Tanzania. Then I took them on a Mexican cruise. Then I took the boys to Egypt. Took the kids to Germany, took the kids to Jordan, and so we did a lot of places. Russia, I took the Russia. What I did was each summer I divided them up. There were 7 of them. I mixed them up so that they weren't brother and sister together. It was cousins. They were cousins. They mixed them up. So, but
Hmm.
the one trip to Russia, I took all 7 of them. But by
Wow.
that time, the youngest one was 12.
Okay.
So it was like traveling with 7 adults. So then I took them to Easter Island. I took them to Bangkok and Cambodia, Angkor Wat. Took them down the Amazon. Took them to Vietnam, and then took the girls on a safari because I had taken the boys earlier. So those were some of the experiences that I took the kids on. And I loved the wonderful thing about it was a couple of times their parents wanted to go, and I told them no. And it was the best thing I did because now I have a relationship with those kids that even my husband doesn't have because we had those special times together. And we've got shared experiences that if their parents were there, it would have been a different experience. So, and they talk about it. They talk about it. And we had some pretty interesting conversations, especially as they got older, because they felt, I know down deep, that they could say things and tell me things that they wouldn't necessarily tell their folks. So, anyway, and the biggest compliment, my oldest, when we were on the safari and he was about 17, he the two cousins that were with him were horsing around and he was tired, so I had a room with double twin beds in it, so he asked me if he could come and get sleep with me because he was tired and they were making too much noise. So he came in and we started talking and we talked most of the night. And when he got home he told his mother, he said, Mom, Grammy treats me like an adult. And that was a big thing to him. And at the time, it just seemed so natural. And those things that happen on trips like that, those were the things that they remember and that I remember. And that's what made them so special. So when you grow up and you have grandkids, take them on a trip. You'll be surprised at what the benefits are.
That's
Okay.
incredible. And I'm thinking, you say took them down the Amazon, like people say I took them to the playground.
No, but I've been
Brent
lucky
had
that
a
I've
quick
been able to
follow-up.
do
The
that.
2 safaris you referenced, you took the boys one safari and the girls one safari. Where were they?
Yeah, I took the boys to Kenya and Tanzania, and I took the girls to Zimbabwe and Botswana. So two
Wow.
completely different safaris.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, and I have such limited experience to you, but I can spending time with my nieces. It is very different when it's us versus compared to us and their parents. So I
Absolutely. Absolutely.
so
So,
Anya says you're such an inspiration, Ryan. So inspirational. Denai, who's our guest tomorrow on this program, says I'm so jealous. Nobody took me anywhere. She's an incredible traveler and dancer. People are reminiscing about their trips with their grandparents. Michael Traeger, my friend in London, he's talking about his trip to Egypt with his grandparents. So you've got a lot of people inspired. And Jordan, he never got to travel with them, but his great grandparents inspired his travels. Their travels he heard about from the 1930s and 60s, and has their photos and reminders of that. And
well, see,
Deji,
that's what I hope my journals are going to do. That they're I'm the journals were really done for my kids and my grandkids, but I'm hoping that their kids will see those and think, you know what, my grandmother, my great grandmother did that. There's no reason why I can't do some of that too. Say so.
And I think we'll close with Debjit. He says, "What an inspiration. I hope I can take your positivity and sense of wonder with me on all the travels that I hope to do during my time on this earth. I've never been happier than when I was on the road with my parents, and hopefully for a few more years with my mother."
Wonderful. That's wonderful.
All right.
Yeah, I
Thank
hope
you for
she does
joining us
too.
today, Audrey.
It was my pleasure, believe me. Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody.